Hello from Skiathos, the Greek island where we're exploring the relationship between landscape, soulscape, and the creative life. Today we're going to reflect on our whole life stories and how to live our best future. Imogen made a comment on episode 3 where I was talking about entering into the realm of myth and story. She said she'd like to hear more about how I transitioned from Christianity to a life communing with trees. So thanks for asking, Imogen. I'm happy to tell some of that story today. But more than that, in this episode, I'm going to invite you to reflect on your own journey through life, the twists and turns, moments of transformation, all that has led you to the place and the person you are today. And I'll offer some ideas of some practices that can help us to go deeper into understanding the flow of our journey. Now, this is more than a nostalgia trip. It can help us to better understand who we are now and how we might live more fruitfully to honour and benefit our future self. This episode might also be helpful for those who have spent time in a religious tradition such as Christianity, and that was my experience. But they've moved on from that belief system, but still feel the gentle call to go deeper in the spiritual soul life. This can be a very difficult and at times painful transition depending on our circumstances. It may bring a deep sense of loss and even betrayal, especially if we have encountered destructive or abusive energies in religious institutions. I hope me sharing some of my story may offer some encouragement that there are places of deep healing and liberation to be found, even if we step away from those institutions. But above all, I hope this episode helps us to appreciate the importance of listening to and sharing our authentic stories without judgment or shame. And that when we do listen in this way, it opens up a profound and important sacred space. Because the way the world is at the moment, with ever increasing binaries and division, it's never been more important to genuinely listen to each other. This is about the boxes we put ourselves in and that we put each other in. Because whether we realize it or not, we live in a world filled with these boxes. Some of them are boxes that are there waiting for us, perhaps even imposed on us, such as the box of our political idealisms, the box of our economic status, or the box of our religion. Others we may make ourselves, such as the careful framework of our sense of identity and style. The boxes of our worlds can be neat and organised, or like the packing case that's seen a dozen house moves damaged and untidy. It doesn't really matter. The point is they're there, and it's comforting to inhabit boxes with labels on. At their best, they help us to understand ourselves and each other. But at their worst, they divide us and stifle growth. So here's some of my story of the boxes I've inhabited and some that I've left behind. Now, I wasn't brought up in the church, but came in as a teenager. And I wasn't just a go to church on a Sunday Christian, I was all in, attending Bible studies, fervently attempting a life of prayer and spiritual discipline. I was so committed, I actually was ordained as a minister in the Methodist Church. And here's a picture to prove it. Also, in those days, I had some hair, as you can see. And on reflection, I'd always had a kind of restlessness of soul. I knew there was something more than the neat and tidy, vaguely atheist middle class upbringing I'd experienced. But I'd never found a framework or guidance to explore any of that expanded way of being. The church gave me that framework, and it gave me a language to use to begin to express and explore it. Now, at its best, that's what religion can do: provide a framework for our growth and flourishing as individuals and as communities. And for quite some time, the Methodist Church was really that space for me. The Spirit of Jesus is a spirit of generous, self-giving love. It's a spirit of deep connection to each other and a dissolving of boundaries that divide us. And it's about that deep connection to God. And, well, now God, that's such a loaded word, I know, but we'll stick with it for now. Anything less than all of this that's peddled as Christianity, and particularly the hateful, divisive rhetoric that pollutes so much public discourse today, is, if you read the Bible carefully, really a gross and abhorrent distortion of what Jesus is actually about. So yes, this framework was helpful to me in enabling me to connect to the inner world through prayer and meditation. It enabled me to develop a deeper self-understanding, a way of being that genuinely sought loving connection with others. Now, what follows is simply my experience. I'm not making any universal claims. This is just my story. Yours may very well be different, and so it should be. Now, let's hear each other's stories without the need to persuade and cajole. This is how I offer this story, and I invite you to tell yours. And in our mutual telling of stories, we all expand a little in our understanding of what it means to be human. Your story will change how I perceive the world and may gently alter the flow of my life as I open my heart to truly listen to it. And I trust that my story, often in love, may do the same for you. So, in my experience, as I meditated on the spirit and life of Jesus, there was always a sense of expansion, of moving out beyond the boundaries of what I'd previously known of myself, known of God, what it meant to live a fully connected life. And I found that every box I put myself in, or I put other people in, or I put God in for that matter, every box eventually broke open. The labels and definitions that I used to make myself feel safe and in control eventually self-destructed. This was particularly the case with my sense of identity. I came to understand my queer sense of self through deepening my meditation practice, and realized that the little box I'd put my sexual and gender identity in was way too small for who I actually am. And that exploration of queerness and spirituality is a vast and fascinating area that we can explore another time. But this wasn't the catalyst for me to begin to saunter down the path that led me out of the Methodist Church. I was doing more and more exploration of how we can use art and creativity to go deeper on our spiritual journeys. Again, I felt that profound sense of beckoning out further into the unknown spaces of being. And the beckoning was one of love, a persistent but gentle voice encouraging me to step out of the box that I built around myself. And so one day, I found myself en route to Cornwall, which is a beautiful county in the southwest of England, where I felt I needed to spend time out in the wild. Now, I wasn't much of an outdoors type of person. I had to borrow my son's tent, and my children thought it was hilarious that I was going to go out camping in the wild forest, but that's what I did. And I sat out in the wild woods at night time, listening and waiting, and reaching out my senses to connect with whatever was there. On the first night, I was absolutely terrified. I could sense things moving in the shadows. I could feel vast, strange energies swirling in the dark. And that first night, I ran back to my tent and pulled the covers up over my head, kept myself safe until morning. But the next night, I knew that I would have to sit with those disconcerting feelings. So I made a circle of candles and sat again in the dark. And the same sensations of fear and trepidation emerged. But rather than flee, I stayed with them and moved towards them with curiosity. And it seems to me that this is very often a point of growth for many of us. When we stop resisting, we stop avoiding or fighting the uncomfortable sensation and begin to realize that it holds a gift for us. And so we begin to hold it with a sense of wonder, trusting that as we engage with it, we'll learn something, or even be transformed and break through into a new way of being. And that's what happened. The more I sat with those sensations of the expansive wild darkness, the more I connected to the vast energies of land, sea, and sky. The rain that came and went, the moon waxing and waning as the tides ebbed and flowed, the deep ancient rhythms of the earth. It was a sense of expanding my awareness of the truth of what it means to be alive, way beyond the safe confines of the neat religious box I'd been in. It felt risky and untamed, an unnamed divine vitality at flux and flow through all things. And I was invited to take my place in the midst of that dance. After that, I explored further and further in different landscapes and places, explored using techniques such as the tarot to understand more. Each new element became a new gateway to a more expansive space. And all of that felt, and it still feels, it all felt to me like the leading of the Spirit of Christ, the way of Jesus, always reaching out to the other, always melting away the boundaries and categories that divide one person from another. But eventually, it got to a place where I could no longer with integrity hold my identity as a Christian minister. It was here on Skiathos, in fact, as I sat meditating in a sea cave with the water lapping at my feet, the sun glinting off the crystal sea, with my back to the damp darkness of the underworld. It was there that I felt the call that it was time to release and move on from the Methodist Church. And so, when I swam back round to the beach, I sent an email from my phone to the church leaders. I said that I felt it was time to move on. And this was a huge step. The Methodist Church had held me for nearly 30 years, and it had provided the framework for me to grow, share, and explore my spirituality. But now the path was leading me out of that community. And, I did so with no animosity. And in fact, I still regard the Methodist Church with fondness and no sense of rejecting and criticizing that way of doing faith and spirituality. And certainly no sense of rejecting the way of love and kindness that is the Spirit of Jesus, but simply a resolute sense that the path I was on led elsewhere. It came with a sense of hopefulness and anticipation, but also loss of community, an institution that had held me and supported me for years, and a loss of identity. Sure, I was no longer a reverend, but on losing that label, I also lost the invitations that I used to receive to speak at events, lead retreats, and so on. I left a solid identity to become some guy who wanders in the forest, sits with the trees, and makes art. Now, that path has involved significant changes in my creative soul practice, and I see making these videos as part of that gentle, loving way of being in the world. So if you felt able to like, subscribe, and share this channel with someone you know who would find it helpful, then please do. That would be really helpful to me. Thank you. So I wonder about the twists and turns on your journey through life. Were there moments of awakening, significant shifts in your way of being, beliefs or practices, and what triggered them? And if you're happy to share your story in the comments, I'd really love to hear it. It can help to step back and consider the long view of the path we've taken. Most of the practices and rituals I offer on this channel, I'd really recommend repeating, and each repetition will take us deeper into richer experiences of soul connection. But this practice, I'd only suggest doing on rare occasions, perhaps once a year on a significant date, or even maybe every 5 years or so, because it's kind of a life review, and there's no need to be doing that every week. Although, if you feel like it will be helpful, then, go for it. One way to do this is to draw out a road or a river on a piece of paper and then draw or write significant way markers on the route, times when everything's shifted for you, when conceptual frameworks changed, relationships shifted, when things that once excited us began to feel cold and barren. These transformations are a sign of life. If we go through our whole lives clinging to the same belief system or the same sense of self for the whole journey, I wonder if we are really truly alive at all. And there's no need to stand in judgment on our previous selves. Imagine a line of views that run back to your birth, perhaps one for every 5 years of your life. How would they speak to each other? How would they relate to each other? It took me some time to reconcile the story of my previous selves, the past me's and the decisions they made, the beliefs they held, to reconcile that to who I am now. I can chart many of those shifts through the changing way I made art, the different styles and themes that emerged and then died away. Some of it makes me cringe looking back now, some of it delights me with the memories, but I acknowledge that this is a person who is no longer present. Let's treat our past selves with kindness. Sometimes that means forgiving ourselves, offering grace. Sometimes it means offering comfort to ourselves that was hurting and facing deep uncertainty as life collapsed around them. When you draw out your life path and think of the moments of transformation and remember the person you were back then, learn lessons for sure, but also offer thanks that they were the foundation that your life now has been built on. It's like the rings of a tree. Its history of growth is preserved in its structure, and we are where we are now, for better or worse, because of the decisions of that host of selves heading back to our birth. And depending on your views on reincarnation, maybe our births before that. The list of selves stretches forward too, all the way to our death. So I wonder what decisions you can take now that will honor the future you, who will look back on this moment and thank you for taking the path that you did. Why not try this exercise in a moment that feels appropriate? Take some time to remember the path you followed, all the people you've been, draw it out as a map or write it as a story, and then hold it gently. Taking some time to offer thanks, maybe forgiveness, maybe offering gentle healing energy to that old self that still lives inside you like the inner tree rings, unseen on the surface, but still an integral part of the structure of who we are. And you can see it in the way that the trees grow, the twists and scars of broken branches heal and swell under the bark and give character and beauty. And also remember this: wherever we find ourselves on this life roadmap, there is always a path to healing. There is always a path to peace. No one on this earth, no one listening to this, has made so many wrong turns and decisions they regret that there isn't a path towards liberation, love, and connection. When I look back on my path, there were moments of such deep despair when it felt like everything was lost and all had been taken apart, alongside also those times of delightful realization and gift. And you know what? If I could see the path stretching forward into the future, there'll be those moments to come as well. Experiences we could never have dreamed or imagined, both magnificent and terrible. Because we're human beings and we're alive. Let's love and care for each other together, and love and care for ourselves as our stories unfold. And as we share our stories with each other, let's listen with reverence and kindness to all that's unfolding. Because when we genuinely listen deeply to another person with no agenda to persuade or manipulate them to a particular point of view or way of being, but simply to honor and treasure their authentic experience, when we do that, then we make sacred space. So this is my invitation to you, to consider the boxes you've inhabited over the years and those that you sit in today. They may be serving you well and it's a space for you to flourish. Wonderful. But there may be a time where the box is too small for the vibrant, amazing person you are and the person you're becoming. And so it may be time to step out into a more expansive space. As you explore these things, if a one-to-one video call will be helpful, I've got over 15 years of experience accompanying people on their spiritual journeys. So do drop me a message and we can discuss what might work for you in all of that. Also, if you'd be interested in having your personal story and experience expressed in a piece of art like these, then I'd be really happy to work with you. When people commission me in this way, we work together to create a unique artwork, maybe a painting like this, or a little sculpture or talisman, or whatever will be helpful to you. If that's something that interests you, then do drop me a message or follow the link attached to this video. So I really appreciate all the positive feedback I've been receiving for these videos. If there's a subject you would like me to explore or be interested in me talking about here, then do let me know. I'll make an episode for you. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a peaceful and gentle day. I'll be here again at the same time next week for more journeys with art, soul, and landscape. Lots of love.